When my nephew slid his phone across the passenger seat without a word, I almost didn't look at it. We were sitting in my driveway. Kevin had stopped by to help me move some boxes to the garage. That's what he'd said. And after we finished, he just sat there in my car with me for a moment. The engine off, neither of us speaking. It was a Wednesday afternoon in late September, one of those days in the Pacific Northwest where the sky can't decide between gray and blue, and the light comes through the windshield at a low angle that makes everything look like an old photograph. The phone screen was already open to his banking app, Kevin's banking app, but the account name at the top read, Walter Mercer, Joint Savings. That was my name. I looked at him. He was staring straight ahead through the windshield. "I'm sorry, Uncle Walt," he said quietly. "I needed you to see it before I said anything." I picked up the phone. My hands felt fine, perfectly steady, which surprised me because inside my chest something was collapsing very slowly, like a building being demolished floor by floor. The balance showed $14,200. 14 months ago, when my daughter Nicole added herself to that account, it had held $312,000. I should back up. My wife Ruth died in the spring of 2021 after 19 months with ovarian cancer. We had been married for 38 years. We built everything together: the house in Tacoma, the savings, the retirement accounts I'd started contributing to the month I got my first real job at 32. Ruth was a school librarian. I was a purchasing manager for a regional construction supply company. We were not rich people by any stretch, but we were careful people. We clipped coupons in our 30s. We drove our cars until the wheels argued about leaving. We paid off the mortgage in 2018 and toasted with the same bottle of Cabernet we'd bought to celebrate the night we closed on the house 17 years earlier. Ruth handled our finances with the kind of quiet precision that made me feel like the house was always slightly more stable than I deserved. When she got sick, I had to learn everything she'd been managing: the accounts, the automatic payments, the investment portfolio she'd moved to Vanguard when we turned 50. I learned fast because I had to, because learning was the only thing keeping me from falling apart. After she was gone, the house got very quiet, and the paperwork got very complicated, and my daughter Nicole started coming around more. I was grateful for that. Genuinely. Nicole was 41, worked as an office manager for a dental group in Bellevue. She lived 40 minutes away, and after Ruth passed, she made a habit of driving down every other Sunday with containers of food and a list of questions about how I was doing. She helped me sort through Ruth's things. She sat with me when I needed to cry and didn't try to rush me out of it. That fall, about 6 months after the funeral, Nicole started mentioning the accounts. "Dad, you've got money sitting in savings earning nothing," she said one evening at my kitchen table. "I've been talking to my friend Carolyn, who works in wealth management. She says there are options, better options than what you've got." I told her I wasn't ready to think about it. She let it go. For a while. By November, she started talking about the joint account. "Dad, what if something happened to you? You have a neighbor who found her father on the kitchen floor and couldn't access his accounts for 3 weeks while the estate sorted itself out." 3 weeks. "You don't want that for me, do you?" I thought about Ruth who had always been the cautious one, the one who read every document twice and slept on every significant decision. Ruth who once told me, gently but seriously, that love and financial trust were 2 separate things, and that conflating them was how families destroyed each other. I told myself Ruth would have wanted Nicole to be able to handle things in an emergency. In February of the following year, I added Nicole to my joint savings account. It felt like a practical decision. Responsible, even. She was my daughter. I had no reason not to trust her. Kevin is Ruth's sister Donna's youngest son. He's 34, works in IT security for a firm in Seattle, and has always been the kind of person who says very little and notices everything. At family gatherings, he's usually in the corner talking to the older relatives while everyone his age clusters around the television. Ruth adored him. She used to say Kevin was the only person under 40 who actually listened when you talked. He and Nicole had never been close. There was a coolness between them I'd always chalked up to personality differences. Nicole was social and loud, and Kevin was neither of those things. I know now it was something else. Kevin told me that September afternoon in my driveway that he had noticed something 7 months earlier. He'd been at my house helping me set up a new laptop. Nicole had suggested I upgrade, had actually purchased one for me as a birthday gift, and asked Kevin to configure it since he knew computers. In the process of transferring files, Kevin noticed a document in my downloads folder, a bank authorization form, already filled out, already bearing what looked like my signature. Kevin didn't say anything that day. He photographed it with his own phone and went home and spent the next 2 weeks convincing himself there was an innocent explanation. There wasn't. Over the following months, quietly, without telling anyone, he traced the transactions from my savings account. He had a friend at a financial compliance firm run the patterns. What they found was systematic. Money moved in increments of $8,000 to $12,000, spaced between 20 and 40 days apart, always on weekdays, always through an external transfer to an account Kevin eventually identified as a sole proprietorship registered in Nicole's name, a business called Cascade Property Concepts, LLC. It had a website. The website looked professional and described a boutique real estate investment firm. The company had been registered 18 months before Nicole added herself to my account. She hadn't started this after I gave her access. She'd been planning it before she asked. Kevin also found, in that downloaded documents folder, a draft of a letter addressed to my primary care physician. The letter requested a cognitive assessment and used phrases like increasing confusion and difficulty managing daily tasks and family concern regarding competency. It was signed with my name, but the sentence structure wasn't mine and I had never written it. He'd given me all of this in the car because he needed me to understand the full picture before he said the words. "I think she's building a case to have you declared incompetent," he said, still staring through the windshield. "The account transfers, the fake business, the letter to your doctor. If a judge sees your savings moved into what looks like an investment vehicle you authorized combined with a medical opinion that you can't manage your own affairs, she could get control of everything. Your pension. This house." I sat with that for a moment. 38 years of careful choices. Ruth's hands on the Sunday afternoon we drove home from signing the mortgage papers. The way she'd squeezed my knee at the stoplight and said, "We built something, Walt. We actually built something." "How long have you known?" I asked. 7 months, Kevin said. "I'm sorry. I kept hoping I was wrong." I wasn't angry at him for waiting. I understood it. Nicole was family, and family makes you want to be wrong so badly that you'll stare at the evidence for half a year just to give yourself more time to find another explanation. "What do I do?" I asked. Kevin finally looked at me. "I've already talked to the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. There's a contact there, an agent named Harris, who handles elder financial exploitation cases." I told her what I found, and she said they'd been looking at Cascade Property Concepts for something unrelated. "Your situation is connected." He paused. "She needs you to file a formal complaint, and she needs you to keep acting normal, at least for a while." I drove to Nicole's apartment that Saturday for what she thought was our regular visit. I brought her a loaf of the sourdough I'd started making during the pandemic, the one Ruth's sister Donna had taught me from her grandmother's recipe. Nicole made coffee. We sat at her kitchen table the way we always did, and talked about her work and the weather. And whether the Seahawks season was recoverable, and I looked at my daughter's face and tried to find the woman I thought I knew. She had her mother's jawline, Ruth's same way of tilting her head when she was listening to you. She laughed at the same things Ruth had laughed at, quietly, with her hand over her mouth. I had to keep getting up to refill my coffee just to have somewhere to put the feeling. At one point, Nicole mentioned, casually, that she'd been talking to a financial advisor about consolidating my accounts. "It would be simpler," she said. "One place, easier to manage, easier for me to track in case anything ever happened. You've got the pension, the Vanguard stuff, the savings, it's a lot to keep separate." "Makes sense," I said. "I'll think about it," she smiled. "I'll send you the paperwork. It's pretty simple, Dad. You don't even have to go anywhere. Just sign and I'll handle the rest." I nodded. I did not trust my voice to do much more than that. Kevin had wired me, technically not a wire, a voice memo app running on my phone with the screen locked, placed in my shirt breast pocket. Everything was being recorded. In Washington State, one-party consent means I can record my own conversations legally. Agent Harris had walked me through it twice on the phone the night before. On the drive home, I pulled into a rest stop on I-5 and sat for 15 minutes doing nothing. I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry, exactly. It was something else. A specific kind of grief I didn't have a word for. Like watching a building you loved get demolished and realizing you've been handing them the tools. The paperwork Nicole sent was a general power of attorney, effective immediately, with scope covering all financial assets, real property, and healthcare decisions. There was a second form that transferred signature authority on my Vanguard account. A third that established a new joint LLC structure for what was described as estate planning purposes, but was, according to the attorney Kevin connected me with, a mechanism to move assets to the LLC before any legal challenge could freeze them. I called Nicole that evening. I went through the paperwork, I said. Oh, good, she said, warmth in her voice. That ease that comes from expecting something to go smoothly. The attorney just needs your signature. You can drop them in the mail or I can pick them up if it's easier. Nicole, where is the money that was in my savings account? Silence. Not long. Maybe 3 seconds. But I'd known this woman her entire life, and in 38 years of watching people react to unexpected questions, I had developed a reasonable understanding of what a pause means when the other person was expecting a different question. What do you mean? She said. The warmth was still there, but it had gotten careful around the edges. The joint account. There's $14,000 in it. 14 months ago, there was $312,000. Dad, we talked about this. I moved it into Cascade as an investment. You're going to see real returns once the properties. We never talked about it, I said. I never agreed to that. I would never have agreed to invest everything in one place without reviewing documentation, without talking to my own financial advisor, without reading every line of every form. You're confused, Nicole said. Her voice had shifted into something I recognize now as practiced. Dad, you've been under so much stress since Mom died. Remember last month when you called me twice asking about your Medicare supplement? These lapses. I'm not confused, I said. And I meant it. I was not confused, not even slightly. I know exactly what's in my accounts and exactly what I did and did not agree to, and I know about Cascade property concepts. I know when it was registered. I know what it was designed to do. Another silence. Longer. Kevin, she said. It wasn't a question. It doesn't matter how I know. Kevin went through my private financial documents and talked to. Her voice had gone cold and tight. Dad, do you understand what he did? He violated my privacy. He could be liable. Whatever he told you, it's tainted information from someone who has always had a problem with me. Someone who has been trying to turn this family against me for Nicole. I said her name the way Ruth used to say mine when she needed me to stop talking and listen. The FBI has been looking at your company. That silence was the longest. When she spoke again, her voice had changed completely. The practiced warmth was gone and the manufactured indignation was gone, and what was left was something thin and exhausted. I was going to pay it back, she said. The market was good. The properties were going to. It was your mother's money too, I said. Every dollar. I couldn't say anything else. I put the phone down on the kitchen counter and walked out onto the back porch and stood there in the dark for a long time, looking at the yard Ruth had gardened for 20 years. The rose bed she'd put in along the back fence. The apple tree she'd planted from a nursery cutting the year Nicole was born. Agent Harris and 2 other agents came to my house the following Tuesday. I sat with them at my kitchen table for 3 hours and walked through everything, every transaction, every document, every conversation I could remember about when the account access had first been suggested. The recording from Saturday was clear. Nicole's voice acknowledging the transfers, acknowledging the company, beginning to explain the intent. Her attorney would later try to argue it was taken out of context. The jury didn't think so. The hardest part wasn't the interviews. It wasn't even the months of waiting while the case built. The hardest part was calling Ruth's sister Donna the same night I called the FBI. Donna and Ruth had been closer than most sisters I've ever known. She'd been at our house every Thanksgiving and Christmas for 3 decades. She'd been at Ruth's bedside the last 2 weeks. After the funeral, she'd called me every Sunday evening without fail, just to check in, just to talk. Her son Kevin had just handed me evidence that my daughter had been stealing from me for over a year. She already knew. Kevin had told her before he told me. She'd spent those 7 months watching Kevin build the case, watching him agonize over whether to come forward, and she had not called me, because Kevin had made her promise to let him handle it his way. "Walter," she said when I called, "I am so sorry." "She's Ruth's daughter," I said. "I know. She has Ruth's eyes." Donna was quiet for a moment. "She does. She always did." We stayed on the phone for a long time without saying much else. Sometimes that's the only honest thing left to do. Nicole was arrested on a Thursday morning. She called me from the booking facility that afternoon. One call, 40 seconds, her voice very small and asking if I was going to bail her out. I told her I loved her. I couldn't. I hung up and sat in Ruth's reading chair by the living room window and didn't move for most of the day. My son-in-law, Nicole's ex-husband, Greg, called me that evening. They'd been divorced for 3 years and didn't speak, but he'd heard through mutual friends. He was unexpectedly kind about it. He said Nicole had always been capable of convincing herself that what she wanted was actually what everyone around her needed, and that this capacity had been the best and worst thing about her, and that he was sorry it had finally gone this far. I'd never liked Greg much. After that conversation, I liked him considerably more. The investigation expanded. Cascade Property Concepts had 4 other investors besides me, people Nicole had recruited through the dental office network where she worked, colleagues and their parents, one woman who had put in $90,000 specifically because Nicole had promised it was a safe conservative investment, just like what I set up for my own father. The total loss across all victims was just under $800,000. Nicole's attorney entered a not guilty plea. The trial ran for 9 days. I testified on the 3rd day. I had not been in the same room as my daughter since the week before I called the FBI. She was sitting at the defense table in a gray blazer, her hair pulled back, and she looked at me when I was sworn in with an expression I still don't know how to describe. Not hatred, not the coldness I'd seen in her voice on the phone. Something more complicated than either of those. The prosecution walked me through the account history, the documents, the phone call recording. Nicole's attorney cross-examined me for nearly 2 hours. He asked whether I had always had difficulty with memory, whether I had ever lost track of financial conversations in the past, whether Kevin, as someone with IT access and a known complex relationship with Nicole, could have manipulated documents or transactions without my knowledge. I answered every question clearly. I'd been an operations manager for 22 years. I knew documentation. I knew the difference between a decision I'd made and a decision someone told me I'd made. The jury deliberated for 4 days. Nicole was convicted on 6 counts including wire fraud, elder financial exploitation, and forgery. She was sentenced to 7 years. I did not attend the sentencing. I asked Agent Harris to text me when it was done, which she did from the courthouse steps at 11:14 on a Friday morning. I was sitting in my backyard at the time, drinking coffee, watching a pair of crows work over the apple tree. The civil recovery process took another year. The court ordered restitution, but Nicole's assets were minimal. Most of what she'd taken had gone into actual real estate purchases that were now entangled in legal holds. The other investors and I eventually recovered somewhere between 20 and 30 cents on the dollar. A woman named Elaine, who'd invested her $90,000 at Nicole's specific recommendation, cried in the courthouse parking lot after the final restitution hearing. I sat with her for a while. I didn't have anything useful to say. Sometimes you just sit with someone. I sold my house in the spring of the following year. I had not planned to. The house was paid off, and I loved it the way you can only love a place where you've lived an entire life. But the legal fees had taken what was left of my liquid savings, and I couldn't justify the property taxes and maintenance on a fixed income without the retirement cushion I no longer had. I got a fair price. I moved to a 2-bedroom apartment in a complex near Donna's house in Gig Harbor, close enough to walk to the water on good days. The first month in the apartment, I woke up every morning for 15 days before I remembered where I was. Kevin helped me move. He and I carried boxes for 8 hours straight, ordered terrible pizza, and watched 2 innings of a Mariners game before we both fell asleep on the couch. We didn't talk about Nicole. We didn't need to. Kevin started coming for coffee on Sunday mornings after that, sometimes at my apartment, sometimes at a diner near the water he liked. We talked about his work and his girlfriend and whether the Mariners had any realistic hope ever in any of our lifetimes. He never asked me how I was doing in the way that requires a specific kind of emotional accounting. He just showed up, which was the more useful thing. About 8 months after the sentencing, I started volunteering with the Washington State Adult Protective Services Financial Exploitation Task Force. They had a program where survivors talked to seniors at community centers, churches, assisted living facilities. I'd done public speaking before, nothing formal, but enough to be comfortable with a room. The first time I stood up and told this story to 23 retirees in a Tacoma community center, I had to stop twice. Not from grief, exactly. From something closer to the feeling you get when you finally say out loud a thing you've been carrying quietly for so long that the saying of it is physically exhausting. What I told them was what I always told them. The account access request doesn't come from someone who seems dangerous. It comes from someone who has earned your trust and knows exactly which fears to use as levers. Stroke, incompetence, the chaos your family would face if something happened to you tomorrow. These are real fears and legitimate concerns, and that's precisely why they work. Review your accounts monthly. Set up automatic fraud alerts through your bank. Never sign financial documents, any documents, without taking them to an independent attorney first, someone you hired, not someone connected to the person asking you to sign. And if something feels wrong, even slightly, even in a way you can't fully articulate, call someone outside the immediate situation. A nephew. A nephew. Your doctor. Anyone who doesn't have something at stake in the outcome. I think about all the signs I missed. Nicole's apartment getting nicer. The car she said was a lease deal. The vacations she always seemed to have a budget for. I told myself she was just good at managing money. I told myself I'd raised a capable woman. I'd raised a capable woman. I'd raised a capable woman. That part was just also true in ways I hadn't understood. Ruth comes to mind often, the way she does when you've lost someone long enough that you've stopped being surprised by it and started just accepting that she'll be part of whatever you're thinking. The way light is part of how you see everything. I visit her grave on the first Sunday of every month. I bring white carnations, her preference, not roses, despite what everyone assumed. I tell her about the apartment, the water view, Donna's cooking. I told her about the trial. I told her she'd been right all those years about keeping certain things separate, about how love and financial trust, however deeply connected they feel, require different kinds of tending. She'd have been devastated about Nicole. She also would have told me to stop waiting to live the rest of my life using that exact phrasing, in that exact tone that meant the conversation was over and the next phase was beginning. I'm working on it. Nicole writes to me. The letters go to Donna's house because she doesn't have my apartment address. Donna brings them over and sets them on my kitchen table without comment. I have not opened any of them. There are 7 so far. I'm not ready. I don't know if ready is even the right frame. I'm waiting for something I don't have a name for yet. Some version of the moment when opening an envelope feels more like connection than like being reached into. Maybe that comes. Maybe it doesn't. What I have is this. The apartment, the water a quarter mile away, Donna on the phone on Sunday evenings the way she has been since Ruth died. Kevin across a diner table talking about the Mariners. Elaine, who emails me every few months from Portland where she moved after the settlement, who has a dark sense of humor about the whole thing that I have grown to appreciate. I have the memory of Ruth in this marriage that was the best sustained fact of my life. I have the knowledge that when something was very wrong, someone in my family was paying enough attention to see it. Kevin could have convinced himself it wasn't his business. He could have decided that the discomfort of speaking was worse than the discomfort of staying quiet. He handed me his phone across a car seat instead, and that changed everything that came after. I'm 68 years old. My life is not what it looked like 4 years ago. The house is gone and the savings are mostly gone, and I see my daughter's face sometimes on strangers on the street, and it does something complicated to my chest every time. That I'm still here. I still have my name on my own accounts. I still make my own decisions and answer for my own choices, and nobody in the world has paperwork claiming I can't. Some mornings, when the fog is in off the water and everything is gray and quiet, I make coffee and stand at the kitchen window and I think, Ruth, I kept it. What we built, the part that was never in any account anywhere, I kept it. And I think she'd say that was enough. I think she'd say start there. I've thought a lot about the sequence of events that led to that driveway. Not Nicole's choices specifically, but the longer chain. Every moment I looked the other way because looking directly felt disloyal. Every time I confused trust with the absence of questions. What I understand now is that the two things have nothing to do with each other. Trusting someone doesn't mean you stop paying attention. It means you care enough about what you built together that you protect it. Even from them. If it comes to that, what Nicole did had a logic to it, and that's the part that kept me awake the longest. She didn't wake up one day and decide to steal. She built toward it slowly, the same way the transfers came out of my account. In increments, each one small enough to rationalize, each one slightly larger than the last. She told herself stories, that I had more than I needed, that she was just moving money around, that she'd pay it back before I ever noticed. Every step followed from the one before it. That's how it works. Not a sudden rupture, but a gradual drift, and the drift only becomes visible when you finally look at the whole distance you've traveled from where you started. Kevin saw the distance before I did. He saw it because he was watching, and he was watching because he paid attention to things other people considered too small to matter. A document in a downloads folder. A timestamp that didn't line up. He spent 7 months carrying that information alone, not because he was unsure what it meant, but because he understood the weight of what saying it out loud would cost everyone involved. That's not passivity. That's a kind of moral seriousness I didn't fully appreciate until much later. He waited until he was certain, then he handed me his phone and let me see it for myself. He gave me the truth without taking away my agency in receiving it. There's real intelligence in knowing how to do that. What I keep coming back to is this. The people who protect you from the worst things are almost never the ones you'd have predicted. They're the quiet ones. The ones sitting in the corner at family gatherings who seem to be barely paying attention. Kevin was present in a way Nicole never was, despite Nicole being the one calling every week, showing up with food, performing the visible work of being a devoted daughter. Presence isn't the same as attention. Showing up isn't the same as attention. Showing up isn't the same as seeing clearly. I know that now in a way I didn't before. The hardest part of getting through something like this isn't the loss itself. It's rebuilding your own judgment afterward. You start to wonder whether you can trust your read on anyone. But I've come to think that's the wrong question. The question isn't whether your instincts are reliable. The question is whether you're willing to act on them when the answer costs you something. I had instincts about the account. I had a feeling more than once that something was off. I didn't follow it because following it meant confronting a possibility I didn't want to be true. That's the thing nobody tells you about courage. It's not the dramatic version, the wire under your shirt, the call to the FBI. Those things happened and they required something from me. But they were downstream of a smaller, harder act. The willingness to look directly at something and let yourself see it clearly. Even when what you see is going to break your heart. That's where it starts. Every honest thing I did afterward began in the moment I stopped explaining away what I already knew. I lost a lot. I'm not going to minimize that. But I didn't lose myself, and I didn't lose the people who actually showed up. Some mornings that feels like very little. Most mornings it feels like enough to keep going.